If I had known that my Friday night shift at Walmart would end with me sprinting out of the store in sheer terror, I probably would have called in sick. But hindsight, right? The night started like any other. I was restocking the shelves in aisle 13. Yes, unlucky number 13. Staring down rows of laundry detergent and bleach bottles. You'd think working at Walmart at night would be a yawn fest, and usually it is. But there's something about that store after midnight. How the fluorescent lights buzz a little louder. How the shadows in the aisles seem longer. How the silence isn't really silence at all. It's like the place has a pulse. A low, rhythmic hum that seeps into your bones if you're there too long. The only other people on shift that night were Mike at the cash register and Sarah, who was back in the stockroom trying to fix a jammed loading dock door. We weren't exactly tight-knit co-workers, but we had a system. I did the stocking, Mike manned the front, and Sarah handled the heavy lifting. That left the rest of the massive store eerily empty. That's when it started. It began as a faint sound, a soft tapping, like someone flicking their fingernails against glass. I stopped mid-shelf, a bottle of detergent in hand, and tilted my head toward the noise. It wasn't coming from the overhead speakers or the flickering lights above. No, it was coming from deeper in the store. "Mike!" I called out, my voice cutting through the silence. No response. I sighed, figuring it was just the HVAC system doing its usual midnight groans. But as I turned back to my cart, I saw him, or rather, the edge of him. A man, just barely visible at the corner of the aisle, standing as still as a mannequin. He was facing away from me, but something about the way he stood made my skin crawl. His posture was all wrong. Rigid yet somehow slouched, like his joints weren't put together right. His head tilted slightly to one side, as though he were listening to something only he could hear. "Sir, we're closed," I said, though my voice cracked halfway through. No movement, no acknowledgement. I hesitated before stepping closer. "Excuse me? You can't be back here. The store is CLO." Before I could finish, the man moved. Not a step, not a turn, but a shudder, like his whole body vibrated for a split second. Then he turned his head toward me, and my stomach dropped. His face wasn't right. Not in a disfigured way, but in a wrong way. Like someone had taken a blurry photo of a human face and stretched it over a mask. His eyes were too small, his mouth too wide, and the skin. It didn't look like skin at all. More like wax, shiny and reflective under the harsh lights. "Can I help you?" I stammered, taking a step back. He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head even further, his neck bending at an unnatural angle. Then, without a word, he turned and shuffled away, his feet barely lifting off the ground. I stood there for a moment, frozen. My brain screamed at me to call Mike, to call anyone, but my feet had other plans. Against every ounce of common sense, I followed him. I trailed the man, or whatever he was, down the aisle, every step hesitant and silent. He moved with that same shuffling gait, his arms hanging unnaturally long at his sides. He didn't seem to notice me, or maybe he didn't care. As he passed the end of the aisle, I ducked behind a shelf of paper towels, peering around the corner to keep him in sight. He turned into the frozen food section, where the glass doors reflected his distorted figure like a warped carnival mirror. And that's when I heard it, whispers. At first, I thought it was coming from the store intercom. Maybe someone accidentally left a microphone on in the back office. But as I strained to listen, I realized it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from him. He stopped in front of one of the freezer doors, his head cocked as though listening to someone behind it. The whispers grew louder, though I still couldn't make out the words. It sounded like multiple voices, overlapping and murmuring in a language I didn't understand. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage, and a part of me begged to just turn around and go find Mike. But my feet stayed planted, rooted by a sick sense of curiosity. Then he opened the freezer door. The glass fogged over as a wave of icy air spilled out, but the shelves were completely empty. No frozen pizzas, no TV dinners, nothing. Just darkness. An inky black void where there should have been a brightly lit interior. The whispers turned into a low hum, vibrating through the floor. The man reached into the darkness with one of those unnaturally long arms. his hand disappearing into the void. When he pulled it back out, he was holding something, a small, writhing object. Took me a moment to realize what it was. A rat. A live, squirming rat. And then he bit it. He didn't eat it like a starving person might, tearing into it with desperation. No, he bit into it with precision, almost surgical, his too wide mouth clamping down on its neck and severing its head in one motion. Blood dripped onto the pristine white tiles as he chewed, his blank, waxy face emotionless. I couldn't suppress the gasp that escaped me. His head snapped up, faster than any human should be able to move, his eyes locking onto mine. The whispers stopped. I ran. I sprinted down the aisle, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. The shelves blurred past me as I made a beeline for the front of the store, where Mike should have been. My chest burned, and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead felt deafening. I glanced back once, just once, and regretted it immediately. The man was chasing me, but it wasn't a normal chase. His movements were erratic, his limbs jerking unnaturally as he skittered across the floor like a puppet with its strings yanked too hard. His head bobbed with every unnatural lurch forward. And his eyes didn't blink. "Mike!" I screamed, rounding a corner so fast I nearly slipped. "Mike! Where are you?" The cash register was empty. The lights at the front of the store flickered, then dimmed, plunging everything into a sickly half-darkness. My breathing turned ragged as I scanned the empty registers, the barren aisles, the cavernous silence of the Walmart. Mike wasn't there. I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine. Behind me, I heard the faint tap, tap, tap of the man's shoes against the floor. I bolted toward the stockroom, the one place left where I might find Sarah. My sneakers squeaked against the tiles as I shoved the door open, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. "Sarah?" I whispered into the dimly lit room. The loading dock loomed ahead, bathed in the pale glow of a single overhead light. Stacks of boxes towered around me, casting long shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. "Sarah?" I called again, louder this time. Then I saw it. A smear of something dark and wet trailing along the floor, leading into the shadows between two towering stacks of boxes. My stomach turned. I knew I shouldn't follow it, but something compelled me. Some twisted need to understand what was happening. The trail ended at Sarah. She was slumped against the wall, her face pale, her eyes wide and glassy. Blood pooled beneath her, soaking into the hem of her Walmart vest. Her chest wasn't moving. My knees buckled, and I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth to stop the scream threatening to tear free. Above her, scrawled on the wall in blood, were 3 words. "He let it out." Before I could even process the message, the overhead light flickered. The room darkened for a split second, and in that moment, I saw movement in the shadows. Not the man, something else. It was massive, its form impossible to comprehend. Dozens of long, sinewy limbs emerged from the darkness, curling and stretching like they were searching for something. Its body shimmered, almost translucent, as though it didn't fully exist in this world. The whispers returned, louder now, filling my ears with a cacophony of voices that seemed to speak directly into my skull. I backed away, but the thing moved faster. One of its limbs shot toward me, and I barely ducked in time, its clawed tip raking the wall where my head had been. The door was my only chance. I turned and sprinted, yanking the door open just as another limb slammed into it, nearly knocking me off my feet. I didn't look back as I ran through the store, dodging fallen shelves and overturned carts. The man was gone, but I knew he wasn't the real danger. Whatever had been in that freezer, whatever Sarah's bloody message was warning about, it was loose now. Epilogue: I made it to the parking lot, collapsing onto the asphalt as the cool night air hit my face. Behind me, Walmart stood eerily silent, its fluorescent lights flickering in the windows. I heard no whispers, saw no signs of movement, but I wasn't stupid enough to go back inside. The police didn't believe me, of course. They found Sarah's body, but the official report blamed it on a robbery gone wrong. Mike was never found, and the man, or that thing in the stockroom, I never saw them again. But sometimes, late at night, I can still hear those whispers. And when I drive past Walmart on my way home, I swear the lights flicker in time with the beat of my heart. I've never gone back, and I never will.